This video is going to showcase a Google add-on called Flubaroo. And the great thing about Flubaroo is that with it, you're able to grade assignments and assessments very quickly. In fact, Flubaroo will do it for you. And I use this mostly on assessments that are multiple choice or short answer. And it's a good way to do a quick pre-assessment before a unit begins, just to get a sense of what the kids know. But I've used it many times, and it's a real lifesaver in certain points. Now, there are definitely limitations to this, and I'm going to talk about those in a minute. But first, I'm going to show you how to actually get Flubaroo. So the first thing you are going to start with is a Google form. So in order to use Flubaroo to grade an assessment, you actually have to create one in a Google form. And here I have one that I've created for a novel that my class will read. It's called The One and Only Ivan, and this is a short assessment that I've created in a Google form on chapters 1 through 3. So I've given the form, and my students have actually taken the form and taken the quiz, and I have responses that have been generated. So here I have 5. I'm going to actually click here on the responses, and I'm going to generate a sheet. So here are all of my responses to the Google form. So essentially my quiz responses by my students. And in order to get Flubaroo, what you'll need to do is go up to add-ons, because this is an add-on and you can only get this add-on while you're in Google Sheets. And you click add-ons and go to get add-ons. And then in the search box, you're going to type in Flubaroo. Okay, it already came up, but this is where I would type it if I needed to. And then you're going to click on Flubaroo. Now, I've already had it installed, so if you have not installed it yet as an add-on to your Google Sheet, you're just going to click over here. This would be blue, and it would say free because it is a free add-on, so you would click that, and in a matter of seconds you would have Flubaroo added to your add-ons. So I'm going to X out of here because I'm going to show you actually how to use Flubaroo on a Google Sheet to grade your students' work. So now I'm going to go up to add-ons, and there's Flubaroo, so it's been installed. And if you're using it for the first time, it will say something like enable Flubaroo on this sheet. And what you will do is just arrow over to enable, and you'll click that. And then you'll have to click off and go back up to add-ons again, go back into Flubaroo and go to grade assignment. Now I'm just going to walk you through the basics first. There are many advanced things that you can actually do with Flubaroo. But I'm going to walk you through just the basics. So you're going to select the grading option for each of the questions in your assignment. So what Flubaroo will do is take each question from your assignment and give you the option of how you want to grade it. So Flubaroo will recognize for me that my first 2 questions are last name, first name. So see how it says identify student here? That means that Flubaroo will not recognize the student's name as an answer and will not grade it. So I'm going to keep this here as identify student because that means Flubaroo will ignore it. It will not grade it. So for my next few questions, I actually, if I go back and show you the form, I'm going to go back to questions. My last name and my first name are here, but then I also have mostly multiple choice questions. And my last one is actually a short answer. So if I go back to my sheet, I'm going to say that these 1, 2, 3, 4 are all normal grading. Well, what if we don't choose normal grading? We can click identify student again, which we're not going to do because our first 2 questions do that. You can skip grading it. So if you want to perhaps have Flubaroo not recognize the answer and just skip it, you can do that. You can also choose normal grading, which is the default here, or you could also grade by hand, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. So let's go back to normal grading. So all of these are normal grading, and I'm going to hit continue here. So now it is asking me to select the submission, the answer submission that I want to use as the answer key. So what you're going to want to do is actually send the quiz to yourself, send a copy of the form to yourself, and actually take the quiz and create an answer key. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So as the last name and the first name, I'm writing answer key here. And I'm going to choose all of the correct answers. And I'm going to submit that. So back where it asked me in Flubaroo to select the student response that I would like to be the answer key that Flubaroo is going to base the grading off of, I'm going to select here, answer key. And I'm going to click continue. So now my grading is complete, and Flubaroo is telling me that it's created a new worksheet on my Google Sheet called Grades. So I can always go back, and I'll show you in a second. Here are the grades. This is a new sheet within my sheet. I can always go back to student submissions to just see the basic Google Sheet with all of my student answers on it. So let's take a quick look at what Flubaroo did to grade our assessment for us. In the top left corner, there's a summary, and it will give us the possible points for the entire assessment. So there were 4 possible points. The average number of points scored by students, so 2.6. How many submissions it counted, so there were 5 student submissions. And the number of low scoring questions, which is 1. And if you take a look at your sheet, the column that is highlighted in this yellow color shows me which questions the students did poorly on. So if we go back here, we can see, if we look at each column, the student submission time, so everything is time stamped, last name, first name. Now you'll notice some students are in red. These students have gotten a score that is lower than 70%. And you can actually change that default score in Flubaroo, but Flubaroo will recognize any score that is below 70% as a score in red. So it calls it out for you. So you can see that Stephanie, she scored a 50%, so therefore she is below 70% and highlighted in red. And it also will break down the total points scored out of the 4 in a percentage grade. How many times that student submitted the form, and also if the grade was emailed to them. And in Flubaroo, you have the option to actually send the students a report of their grade on the assessment via email. And then what Flubaroo will do for me is give me a breakdown of each question and how students answered it in terms of how many points they scored on the question. So here, Kimmy, who's the main character of the novel? She did not know that, so she got 0 points on that. And then below that, Flubaroo will show me the percentage of correct answers for each question. So 80% of my students answered that correctly. So not only does Flubaroo generate this valuable data for you very quickly on a spreadsheet, you can also view it in graph form. So to do that, you go back to add-ons, and anytime you want to do anything in Flubaroo, you're going back to add-ons. Clicking on the Flubaroo arrow or hovering over it, and then going down to view grade report. And what Flubaroo will do for you is just in a matter of seconds, it will create a report that summarizes the responses on your assessment. So here's a histogram of the grades. It will give you the average points scored, and it will break down what the spreadsheet looks like in terms of a histogram. And you can actually email yourself this report. So I'm going to X out of that. So how do I now share these grades with my students? Now there are a couple ways to do it. You can actually, like I said before, you can email your students the grades and the grading report. And to do that, you go back to add-ons, hover over Flubaroo, and you're going to go to share grades. Now to do this, you will need your students' emails plugged in, but you can, once it pops up here, I'm going to show you some of the options. If you click advanced options, you can assign stickers to the email. So when your student opens it, if they got a good grade, they'll see a little animated sticker. You can select the grade sharing method, and you can decide if you're going to include your questions and scores in there and an answer key. And if you wanted to type a message like great job, or here are your grades for the Ivan quiz, you can do that as well. Now keep in mind that Flubaroo does establish an email quota, so there are only so many emails you can send to your students per day. Typically what I do is I feel like I like to give the students a paper copy of their report so that they can actually see how they do. So I tend to print the reports out, and to do that you go to add-ons, hover over Flubaroo, and then you go to advanced, and then I click print grades. And I'm going to show you the sticker option. So when you actually print your grading reports, it will generate a sticker for each student who scored above a certain grade. So here I'm going to click show advanced options, stickers and more, and you're going to set up your sticker here and include a sticker. And I'm going to say if a student scored above 75, I'm going to click this little pizza sticker and click done. I'm going to include a list of questions and scores, so my student's going to see the question and what they got on the question, how they answered the questions. I'm going to include their responses, and I like to include an answer key so that students can see the correct answer and compare it to what they chose. And then I'm going to click continue. And what will happen is Flubaroo will actually create a Google Doc for me, and a new tab will open up of all of the grading sheets for this particular assessment. And what I will do from this Google Doc is I will print the students' reports and hand them back to them. Now just a little tip, something that I like to do, I go through each grading sheet and let's see, I'm going to open this for you and show you. When I print each grading sheet, I highlight the student's grade, and I go through with a highlighter and I highlight any questions that they got wrong so that they have a quick at a glance look at what they need to work on going forward. So I just take a few moments after I print out the grading sheets to do that as I enter them. An example of the report, and I suppose you could even just highlight, if you have a color printer, you could highlight in the actual doc and print it. But I typically will go through, after I've printed all of the sheets, I will go through with a good old-fashioned highlighter, and I will highlight the student's grade and then go through the sheet and highlight any questions that they scored incorrectly on. So just a few tips and tricks I want to call out to you before we wrap up. The first thing, it's pretty important, if you're using Flubaroo to grade any assessment that is not just multiple choice, so if you have a short answer assessment, you need to be careful that it will, if a student spells a word wrong and you're not grading for spelling, Flubaroo will mark that answer wrong. So for instance, if you take a look here, my question was, who is Ivan's best friend? And that was not multiple choice. That was actually a short answer, and I was looking for the answer Stella. So I noticed that a few students got that wrong. So they could have gotten that wrong based on their spelling. So if I'm not counting spelling, what I want to do is I just want to go through any short answer questions and check them for spelling or capitalization, because Flubaroo will mark the answer incorrect if it is not capitalized or capitalized in the answer key and the student does not capitalize it. So spelling and capitalization are marked incorrectly if they don't directly match the key. And there is a way too to override the capitalization piece of it, and I'll show you that in a minute. But the spelling portion of it, what I typically do is before I grade the assignment via Flubaroo, I go to my spreadsheet and I just check over the question and I make sure that the student spelled it correctly. So maybe the student has to spell Stella correctly to get it correct, but In this case, I'm not going to count spelling. So I noticed that Stephanie spelled Stella wrong, but she knew the answer was Stella. So what I typically do is I go through and I'll just copy another student's answer and I will paste it over Stephanie's answer, so that when Flubaroo grades the sheet, the correct spelling is there and Stephanie does not get it wrong based on her spelling. So that can be time consuming, so just keep that in mind. The last thing I want to call out to you is just the help page, which is very helpful and will actually describe certain features available by Flubaroo, like the grading by hand feature I spoke of before, and how to accept an answer range rather than just one particular answer for each question. And to find the Help Center, you go to Add-ons, Flubaroo, Help, and then click on Learn More. And on this page, there are some tips and tricks which are extremely helpful. If you want to learn how to override Flubaroo's default behavior in terms of case sensitivity, it will show you how to do that here, and it will tell you what to enter on your answer key in your Google form to override that. If you would like to include a numerical range, for instance, in terms of having Flubaroo accept a certain answer rather than just having one answer, but including a certain range of answers, there's a way to do that as well. If you would like to accept multiple correct answers, there's a way to do that. And like I mentioned before, grading questions by hand, the Help Center will lead you through step by step of how that works as well. And there are several other features like allowing extra credit and so on and so forth that you can learn about in the Help Center. So I hope this video gets you started with Flubaroo. I really do feel that it's a very valuable tool if you're going to give a quick assessment and get some quick feedback from your students in terms of what they're learning, or even I've used it many times as a pre-learning activity to just kind of get a feel for where my students are in a certain subject and get immediate data without having to spend hours grading assessment.